During the 1800s, well-heeled travellers made the grand tour of the continent, Europe. Your grand tour begins in Switzerland, where one train makes an unforgettable run through the Alps between Zermatt and St. Moritz. It's the famous Glacier Express. Since 1930, it has carried millions of passengers into the Alps to see some of Europe's enormous ice sheets. The eastbound run begins near Zermatt. Not far from Zermatt, there is a familiar profile, the Matterhorn. Zermatt is a year-round resort with a charming distinction. No cars are permitted to enter the town centre. You can explore the town only on foot, in an electric cart, or by horse-drawn carriage. Charting the highs and lows of the Glacier Express shows just how extraordinary this rail line is. It reaches a high point of more than 2,000 meters, but it also drops into low alpine valleys. The Glacier Express leaves Zermatt. This must be one of the world's slowest express trains. It takes nearly 8 hours to cover 250 kilometers, but you wouldn't want it to travel any faster because the views are dazzling. Not far from Zermatt in 1991, a huge section of mountainside sheared away and plummeted into the valley below. The Glacier Express crosses 291 bridges, an average of a bridge every 800 meters. The 3 rail companies that operate the line in concert know how to make the most of the stunning scenery. There are special panorama carriages, designed by the same Italian company that builds the exotic sports cars, the Ferrari and Lamborghini. All along the route there are charming towns and villages, like Brig, with its magnificent stucco palace. Villages nestle in alpine valleys. There are hand-painted houses and hotels. In one village, a house is decorated with the world's oldest painting of the legend of William Tell, who famously shot an apple from atop his son's head. The gentility is in sharp contrast with the terrain. The region is racked with steep gorges, best appreciated on foot. The journey continues. Now the rail line winds through the Rhone River valley, following the river almost to its source. Before long, the train climbs to a stopping point where passengers can board one of Switzerland's renowned cable cars to visit the Aletsch Glacier. The Aletsch Glacier is the longest ice sheet in Europe, 23 kilometers, and estimated to be as much as 800 meters thick. 3 huge ice rivers meet to form the main glacier. Meltwater flows from here into the Rhone and on to the Mediterranean. As the train continues to climb, it uses a rack system. Between the rails lies a double row of teeth, which interlock with toothed wheels underneath the train. Most trains stay on the track using only the friction between the wheels and the rail. But on the steepest parts of this route, it's only this constant meshing of cogs that keeps the train securely engaged with the track. The train faces ridge after ridge, obstacles that must be traversed. The solution is, of course, tunnels, lots of them. In some tunnels, the track makes a spiral in order to gain height inside a mountain. Here, the train emerges about 60 meters higher than it was when it entered the tunnel. It took extraordinary courage and ingenuity to build such a railroad, but the Swiss persevered even as rock crumbled or caved in. There are 91 tunnels on this route. It's hard to imagine the labor involved in creating a rail line in such challenging terrain when today you can ride through it in comfort. The mountains make dining aboard a Swiss train an unusual experience. If the train is on a steep grade, drinks are likely to spill. So wine is served in tilted glasses. It will remain unspilled even if the train is climbing. As the meal comes to an end, a waiter demonstrates his skill at pouring a small schnapps, a local liqueur. For its first 50 years, the Glacier Express ran only in the summer months. From October to April, parts of the line were buried under up to 10 meters of snow. Each spring, the tracks had to be cleared. Winter's avalanches often wiped out bridges. At one ravine, a clever contraption was put into use, a folding center span, which could be winched into position or down, out of harm's way, depending on the season. These days, special avalanche galleries protect the track during winter. The Glacier Express now runs year-round, carrying skiers to alpine resorts. A wintertime ride on the Glacier Express is a chance to experience a pristine, snow-covered world. The train climbs steadily higher, toward Oberalp. The grades are unusually steep here, as much as 1 in 9. The cogs of the rack system are absolutely essential. The line loops through a series of 3 tunnels, climbing all the while. A ski lift carries skiers over the entrance to the second tunnel. The third and longest tunnel runs for 300 meters. Tunnels seem to accomplish the impossible. The Glacier Express is back in summertime. Near the town of Oberalp, the line reaches its highest point, an altitude of 2,033 meters. From Oberalp, there's only one way to go, down. The rack system enables the train to make steep descents as well as steep climbs. In the valley, you can take a side trip into the region known as the Swiss Grand Canyon. This river is the Rhine, which carved the gorge. As engineers struggled to build railway lines through the Alps, rivers often showed the way. A river takes the natural approach to cutting through mountains. Back to a drier form of transport. Another engineering dilemma, how to keep climbing while crossing a deep river gorge. The solution, a spectacular stone viaduct arcs directly into the mountainside. The track pierces the rock face 65 meters above the river. It's one of the most photographed bridges in all Europe. If you like to travel back in time, you may want to make a side trip, stopping at Filisur, where some unusual old train engines are still in operation. They were nicknamed baby crocodiles because they seemed to waddle around the tight curves. The crocodiles went into service in the 1920s. This dining car dates from 1929. The Glacier Express started with steam locomotives. It was only electrified in the early 1940s. Some of the same trains that plied these tracks in the early days still make short excursions. Nowadays, the Glacier Express uses state-of-the-art locomotives, with acceleration and braking controls located in the arms of the driver's space-age chair. The latest computer software keeps the train running efficiently. Top speed, 100 kilometers per hour. And yet it feels as if you're in the quaint, storybook world of Heidi. And you are. The Swiss film of the children's book was filmed not far from here. One more engineering challenge: how to gain height in the narrow Albula River Valley without using rack assistance. The answer has 7 parts, 3 spiral tunnels and 4 bridges over the same river. By journey's end, the train has once again climbed high into the Alps. There's one more tunnel, then St. Moritz, last stop. In the days of the Grand Tour, this was a watering hole for the rich and famous. Some came for months at a time to take the mountain air and to experience the tranquility. Now, visitors are more likely to plunge into action. There's windsurfing in the summer, and tobogganing in winter on the Cresta Run. Since 1884, races have been hurtling down an icy tunnel at speeds of up to 129 kilometers per hour. The tradition is to ride head first, with your face just inches from the ice. And on this steep grade, there's no rack system to help slow the descent. The Grand Tour continues in Spain, where the Glacier Express travels from Valencia to the historic towns of Teruel and Tarragona, and on to Barcelona, in the heart of the Catalan region. Valencia, where the journey begins, is one of the largest cities in Spain. But in this sun-drenched world, the mood is generally relaxed. There is a gentle quality to life. This is an extremely fertile region, famous for its oranges, smoked meats, local specialities. Markets are filled with fresh fish and seafood. The Mediterranean isn't far away. Life here may be easygoing, but the architecture is anything but nonchalant. The temperature can reach 35 degrees. Water is extremely important to irrigate precious crops. In order to solve disputes over water, the city maintains the oldest judicial institution in Europe. The Water Tribunal meets every Thursday at the stroke of noon in the doorway of the cathedral, as it has for over 1,000 years. The members settle arguments between farmers over the distribution of water in the nearby countryside. Serious and binding decisions are made, virtually in the street. High on a hilltop not far from Valencia are the remains of Castle Xàtiva. "30 towers once dominated the walls. Hannibal was just one of the legendary warriors who strode these ramparts. He marched his soldiers and elephants through Spain and across the Alps on his way to fight the Romans. Valencia's rail terminal, where you can catch a train heading north. Spanish trains tend to be extremely punctual. You can usually count on your train running to the exact minute. This is second class. We're off on a 3-hour journey to Teruel. Outside, rich farmland said by many to be the most fertile region in all Europe. Arriving in Teruel, right on time. The town was captured by the Arab Moors in the 8th century. They ruled Teruel for 300 years. Again, water is vital here. This magnificent aqueduct was built in the 16th century. This 12th century cathedral tower is the result of Moorish craftsmen embellishing former Christian buildings with Islamic styles. "600 years ago, this bell marked the tragic end of Teruel's famous lovers, Isabel and Diego. Her family was rich, while his was poor, so they were forbidden to marry. Diego left Teruel and returned 5 years later, a rich man. But Isabel had married. Diego died of a broken heart, and within hours, so did Isabel. They lie together now, united in death. Teruel has known long periods of peace and prosperity. Muslims and Christians lived in harmony here for 300 years, until the zealots of the Spanish Inquisition closed the mosques and drove the Muslims out. Is it the fantastic architectural details or the sunshine that makes spirits light? A salute to an ancient custom. Every year during fiesta time, the young men of a town near Teruel test their courage against a young, specially bred fighting bull. Happily, the bull is unharmed. The boys only try to touch it. The one who makes the most touches is considered the bravest in town, for that year anyway. Leaving Teruel, en route to Tarragona, 2 hours away. A station stop, where passengers can have a meal. Often a meal is made up of tapas, a little of this and a little of that. The food at this station is so good that locals actually come here just to eat. Of course, food is also available on board the trains. Many intercity trains have gleaming modern snack bars, and hot meals are available on some routes. There are even in-transit movies, but it'd be a shame to miss the ever-changing views. 2 hours after leaving Teruel, the train arrives in Tarragona, on the shores of the Mediterranean. This is Catalonia, a region that traces its history back more than 2,000 years. The city was a favorite of Roman emperors. This amphitheater was once the talk of Europe. It can hold 24,000 spectators. From Tarragona, the Romans launched their conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. You can relax in the courtyard of Tarragona's cathedral and museum, and wander through a treasure trove of Roman and ecclesiastical art and sculpture. This is a particularly lovely sight, the Sleeping Virgin, created in the 14th century. A sculpture portrays a local fiesta time tradition, human towers called castels. Each story is made up of 4 people standing on the shoulders of the group below. A child with a head for heights is selected to stand at the very top. The final leg of this journey is especially popular. It's a short trip through the countryside. After just an hour and a quarter, the train reaches Barcelona. And suddenly, everything changes. Barcelona is the capital of Catalonia, and probably Spain's most cosmopolitan city, with a sophisticated boulevard culture. This church is the unfinished masterpiece of the architect Antonio Gaudí, a native Catalan. It's the Church of La Sagrada Familia, the Church of the Sacred Family. Gaudí died in 1926, but work continues, based on the plans he left behind. The architect used every opportunity to replace straight lines and flat surfaces with undulating curves. His Casa Mila building lacks a single straight line. The sculpted air ducts and chimneys seem so ominous that they were nicknamed the Witch Scarers. A short journey outside Barcelona to Catalonia's holiest spot, the mountain of Montserrat. Hermits used to live in caves among the rocks. At the top, a monastery dating from the 9th century. During the War of Independence in 1811, the French killed all the monks. But today, 300 Benedictine monks live here. The icon of the Black Virgin was supposedly hidden by St. Peter to avoid its capture by the Muslim Moors. After being lost for almost a century, it reappeared. The sacred mountaintop is a tranquil ending to a visit to Barcelona. Before you get back on a train, you might want to head for Catalonia's famous beaches. At fiesta time, fireworks light up the sky. The perfect ending to a trip through Spain, a land of heat, light, and vivid color. Next stop on the grand tour of Europe, Germany, where you can travel from Cologne to Frankfurt via Bonn and Koblenz on the Rhine Express. This is a train trip with a difference. One ticket allows you to go back and forth between the train and the tour boats that travel down the Rhine River, renowned for the castles along its banks. Your starting point for the Rhine journey, Cologne. This is an ancient city. Its name reflects its past. Cologne was a Roman colony. Founded in 33 BC, the city has known periods of great prosperity. notably in the 18th century, when a recipe for the distilling of flower blossoms in alcohol was imported from Italy. The fragrant result became famous the world over as eau de Cologne. Cologne's most famous landmark, its cathedral, the Dom. It's considered one of the grandest churches in Europe. Twin spires rise 157 meters above the street. The Dom is a miraculous survivor of the Allied bombing raids during World War II, which devastated 90% of the city centre. There are many such survivors. A magnificent collection of churches is still standing in Cologne. Not all survived. Some ruins have been left in place as reminders of those terrible times. Exploring Cologne can make a person thirsty. And if beer's your drink, Germany is paradise. It has about 40% of the world's breweries. In traditional taverns, waiters will automatically serve you a fresh beer as soon as your glass is empty, until you say stop. Leaving Cologne. Between Cologne and Bonn in Brühl is the Schloss Augustusburg. To visitors in the 18th and 19th centuries, its architecture and grounds would have made it seem like a fantastic amusement park. Nowadays, visitors to Brühl can visit a modern-day amusement park called Phantasialand. It's just a short trip to Bonn. The entire Rhine Express takes only 2 hours non-stop. Bonn was the seat of Germany's government until reunification. Berlin is now the federal capital. This is another European city that has banned cars from its old town centre. Bonn is the birthplace of a man many considered the greatest composer in history, Ludwig van Beethoven. Beethoven House still stands, another survivor of wartime bombing. It's a site of pilgrimage for many a music lover. What would this musical genius make of the local street performers? On the outskirts of Bonn, you can take Europe's oldest rack railway to Europe's oldest nature reserve, the Seven Mountains. This little railway carries you up to the Drachenfels, the Dragon's Rock. These mountains are steeped in legend. They're said to be the setting of Grimm's fairy tale, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. There are several ways to explore the Rhine Valley. From Bonn, you can get back on the regular train. Or from near Bonn, you can take a side trip on the Vulcan Express through one of the most scenic regions of the Rhine Valley. Actually, it isn't much of an express train. Its average speed is 20 kilometers per hour. You can stop to sample German wines. Many of the vineyards are near here. The northern climate doesn't ripen red grapes easily, but the white wines are justifiably famous. The Rhine journey continues to Koblenz, located at the meeting point of the Rhine and Moselle rivers. A colossal monument to Kaiser Wilhelm I has stood here since 1897. This is a good place to wander along the Rhine, to begin to get even closer to it than the rail line can. You can use your train ticket on a boat. After all, the famous castles on the Rhine were meant to be seen from the water. Nowhere else are castles clustered together as they are here. The wealthy, noblemen, archbishops, and royalty took advantage of the natural beauty and built their homes along the river. Burg Katz, built to rival another castle downstream. It worked. The other castle was soon nicknamed Burg Maus. A bit further down the river, Lorelei Rock. According to local legend, a beautiful blonde nymph used to sit on top of the cliff and sing a siren song, causing love-struck sailors to crash their ships on the rocks below. In this steep valley, everything perches close to the river. Towns, roads, and the rail line. From Koblenz, the Rhine Express heads for Frankfurt. The dream world of castles on the Rhine is left behind, exchanged for a glimpse of a modern commercial centre, home to the powerful Bundesbank and more than 400 other banks and financial institutions. But then again, many of the city's oldest buildings have been beautifully preserved, or in some cases restored, following wartime damage. In Frankfurt, as in much of Germany, the elegance of the past is still very much in evidence to travellers of today. For your final rail journey across Europe, board the most famous and infamous train in the world. It passes through 4 countries. If you board in Paris, it whisks you overnight to Venice. It can be only one train, the Orient Express, officially known as the Venice Simplon Orient Express. This is the train that sets the standard for all other luxury journeys. A staff of 43 serves a maximum of 188 passengers. The Orient Express first ran in 1883, soon after the invention of the first rolling restaurants, dining cars. And what dining the train offers these days? Live lobsters are loaded aboard, along with a bountiful supply of fresh produce and other supplies. Many couples make the journey to celebrate a special anniversary. Maybe it's the charming decor and subdued lighting. Maybe it's the delight of being served a gourmet meal aboard a moving train. Maybe it's being surrounded by elegantly dressed fellow passengers. Formal attire is not required, but it is recommended. Or perhaps it's knowing that the Orient Express once carried spies, murderers, and lovers all the way to Constantinople. However it happens, the train creates an unforgettably romantic experience. The bar stays open until the last passengers have gone to bed. The sleeping cars are everything you'd expect. Once a year, the train stops running for a full 3 months, while the entire train is refreshed and checked for the slightest defect. The result, impeccable comfort. Next morning, gorgeous alpine vistas as the train passes through Austria and then Switzerland. Another lovely meal, breakfast, served in your compartment. The youngest of these carriages dates from 1931. Every detail is sumptuous. Crystal doors by Lalique. A grand piano which passengers are welcome to play. And even in the bathrooms, fresh flowers. It's lunchtime, and that fresh seafood makes its appearance. Anyone riding this train had better like a steady flow of rich food. Late in the afternoon, the train crosses a causeway, and you're there. Venice. Walk out of the train station and a miracle unfolds before you. A city rises up out of the water. A city built on 120 magical islands. The golden lion is the symbol of the city, and St. Mark. The apostles' remains were interred in Venice's St. Mark's Cathedral. The Doge's Palace. Each Doge was a kind of elected king who headed the Republic. The city's art and architecture are a sumptuous blend, from the Byzantine style to the Renaissance. There are 177 canals, many of them so narrow 2 gondolas can barely pass. Riding through these watery alleyways, you can experience the intimate nature of this ancient city. "400 bridges link the narrow streets. In this city, virtually everything happens by or on the water. How did it all come to be? Who built this marvel? And how was it done? Commerce built the city. A rich and powerful merchant aristocracy traded with both East and West. Their forebears had fled to a region known only for its swamps, in order to escape the barbarians that rampaged across what is now Italy. The merchants were often educated elsewhere, but came home to Venice. Over the centuries, wealthy aristocrats built lavish homes along the Grand Canal. How can buildings survive on what were once swampy islands? In many places, sturdy piles were created using prime timber. The piles were sunk into the clay. This formed a solid block, which was made all the more stable by the cohesive unit of houses built on top. St. Mark's Square. At one end is St. Mark's Cathedral. 4 bronze horses guard the entrance. The church is a Byzantine masterpiece, decorated with elaborate mosaics. Sacred images are encased in gold. Venice is a fantasy made real. Nowhere else on earth has a city of such refinement been created amid flowing water. An intercity train departs, leaving Venice for another wonderful Italian city, Florence. It's about 3 hours away by train. Not far from Florence is Pisa, with its famous Leaning Tower. The route traverses the rich Po River Valley. second class, comfortable but unavoidably average compared to the Orient Express. But Florence does not disappoint. For travellers making the grand tour, this city was the high point where they could book a room with a view. The less affluent came to see the art, the wealthy came to buy it. Many of the city's riches were carried home to the great houses of Europe and America. For nearly 300 years during the Renaissance, one powerful family, the Medicis, ruled the city. Their offices are now a museum of art. Although the Medicis had many enemies, they are immortalized in sculpture and stand today among the works of the great artists they supported. Many of the rich merchants of the time genuinely loved art and artists. Others may have harbored guilt over their wealth. Whatever, Florence and the world benefited greatly as wealthy patrons supported the arts, especially church art and church architecture. In the art museums, you can experience the subtle, radiant paintings of Piero della Francesca, one of the most distinctive of all Renaissance painters. The colors are delicate, yet the impressions created are intense. Florence is art, light, beauty, and the gateway to Pisa and Tuscany. From Florence, you can board a train to Pisa. Intercity trains have the same sleek profile as France's high-speed TGV. A very different profile awaits travelers in Pisa. The famous church bell tower, now known as the Leaning Tower, has, for several years, been in serious danger of collapsing completely. Recently, painstaking and highly experimental work has nudged it ever so slightly back toward the vertical. But no one knows how long it will be possible to keep this fragile and idiosyncratic structure in place. Beyond the cities of Florence and Pisa, the glories of Tuscany beckon. There are small hill towns to explore, lush countryside to wander through, and of course, wines to taste. Every journey comes to an end, and there is no better way to draw your grand tour of Europe to a close than by seeing and tasting Tuscany.